Do you like tanking in role-playing games? Do you like barbarians? Are you curious about how effective the new World Tree Barbarian subclass might be in D&D 5e? Well, if any of those things are true, then I think you're really gonna enjoy this one. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, I like to take a deep dive into a specific character build every week for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also really enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just really like theory crafting, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby. This is the last video that I'm going to be recording in this little studio office of mine. I'm going to be moving. They jacked up the lease price on me here, and I've got space at home, so I'm going to be kind of trying to create a little office space in my home. So things are going to be looking a little different from here on out. I'm a little sad to be leaving, truth be told. I really like this place, but it'll be nice to be saving some money every month. So hopefully next week won't feel too jarring for you as you help me settle into my new digs. Okay, let's just jump in here. Even though the majority of my builds that I do on this channel build around damage, one of my very favorite ways to both build and play characters in D&D, and in any RPG for that matter, is around the tank archetype. For those unfamiliar with the term, a tank in an RPG is basically a character whose primary goal is to protect their teammates, but the way they actually protect those allies isn't by buffing or healing them necessarily. Instead, tanks protect by specifically trying to get the enemies to attack themselves instead of their friends. Naturally, then, the goal with a good tank build is to make yourself as durable, as survivable as possible, since ideally, you're going to be getting targeted all the time. But as longtime viewers of the channel have heard me say a million times by now, the challenge with trying to build a tank in D&D 5e, as opposed to a lot of role-playing games, video games especially, is that it's very difficult to just sort of force the enemy to attack you instead of your friends, right? There's no real taunt mechanic here, and again, I think that's a good thing for the record. So just building for survivability isn't a particularly effective strategy, as unless you're doing something to encourage enemies to attack you, then all of that durability is largely worthless, right? In my tank builds in the past, which, by the way, if you are curious to know like how many tank builds I've done or whatever, check the video description. I've got a table of contents that specifies, there's a column there that says what the role for the build is, with a hyperlink to every build and a short description, among other things. But anyways, the way I've tried to get around this little problem of not being able to hold enemy aggro, right, is by picking up at least a few levels in a subclass that gives you a taunt-like ability, where if you hit an enemy, it puts a debuff on them that imposes disadvantage on the enemy's attacks made against anyone but you. The subclasses I'm talking about are specifically the Cavalier Fighter, the Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, and the Armorer Artificer. But sometimes having to do that is a little frustrating. Having to take 3 levels into a class and subclass that you weren't planning on otherwise taking, just so you can pick up a sort of soft taunt, can massively slow down your character progression. Also, imposing disadvantage on an enemy if they attack anyone but you still doesn't guarantee that they will attack you, right? If we're super durable and our friends aren't, well, depending on your DM, depending on how intelligent the enemies you're fighting are, etc., your ally might be the more attractive target to try and hit anyways. And also, what if you can't play with anything other than the new 2024 Player's Handbook at your table, which has no Artificers, no Ancestral Guardians, and no Cavaliers? I mean, we've got the goading attack Battlemaster maneuver, but that's not something that we can use every turn on every hit, right? So is tanking dead in the 2024 PHB? Not by a long shot. Enter the new World Tree Barbarian. I love this subclass so much. It is easily my favorite new subclass in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and for my money, the best tank in the book as well, maybe in the whole game. Not because they get an ability that imposes disadvantage on enemies if they attack anyone else, but because, especially if you build them right, they get a lot of ways to make it so that your enemies just can't even get to your allies to attack them in the first place. And in that way, even without any kind of taunt to speak of, this tank might be better at actually tanking than any other build I've done on the channel so far. Are you ready to talk about him? I proudly present D&D episode number 186, The World Tree Barbarian. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week, but this might be like my new favorite. I mean, check out the flail, the trident, the roots of the world tree. Oh, looks so cool. Anyways, if you'd be interested in following Randall on social media to check out the other stuff he's done, or to maybe even see if you can commission him to create some art for your character or your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. And also, I'm absolutely thrilled to have one of my very favorite sponsors ever, Obvious Mimic, nice, sponsoring the video this week. It's been a while. Right, raise your hand if you have ever wished that you could play D&D by yourself sometimes. Maybe you just don't have the time or energy to get together with a group, or you only have an hour to play instead of 3 or 4. Maybe you've got a million characters you'd love to try out. I know a guy like that. But just don't have enough campaigns to try them all out in. Maybe you're a forever DM and you would love to play once in a while, but don't have anyone who can take on that DM role. Maybe your group keeps canceling. Or heck, maybe you don't even have a group to begin with. Well, my friends, this is the gap that Obvious Mimic is meant to fill. In addition to a fantastic lineup of t-shirts like this one, they have not 1, not 2, but 3, yes, 3 incredible solo D&D adventures. Wolves of Langston is a classic fantasy adventure with a bit of like mystery / crime-solving twist. Crystals of Zaleth is a jungle setting filled with exploration and discovery, and their latest, The Secret of Oni Island, is a little bit more piratey, filled with swashbuckling action and open seas, which comes out on October 15th, though you can pre-order it now, and there's a special pre-order price available if you do. And they've actually got a 4th adventure that's going to be launching on Kickstarter in October. I'll actually be talking to you guys about that in just a couple of weeks. With each one, you play a character from levels 1 to 4. I mean, hey, this might actually be a good thing for you to do with a character you're thinking about bringing to a longer campaign, like before a session 0, right? Try out your character, get a feel for him, see if there's anything you might want to tweak with them, and maybe even use this solo adventure to help create your backstory, yeah? In these solo adventures, you interact with NPCs, you make your own choices that truly impact the game, find loot, gain experience, and of course, fight monsters. Everything you would hope to find in a solo D&D adventure, you are going to find here. So do yourself a favor and check them out. Winter is coming. Grab yourself something warm to drink, get cozy with a blankie, maybe in front of a fire, and go on an amazing adventure all by yourself. Oh, also, if you would like to support Obvious Mimic while getting monthly solo adventure shorts, you can actually join their Patreon side quest by Obvious Mimic. I'll put a link to that in the video description as well. When you do check them out, I would appreciate it if you would use the link that I've got in the video description and the pinned comment so that they know I sent you. And if you use the discount code Colby10 when you check out, you'll actually save 10% off of your entire order. What a deal. Okay, huge thanks to Obvious Mimic. You guys freaking rock. Let's get back to the build. Okay, at level 1, for our starting class, yes, we're going to start off Barbarian, and even though I am going to take a dip into something else later, you could absolutely just play this as a straight class build, which I know is pretty rare for me. But yeah, Barbarian's got a lot of love in 2024. I mean, in the 2014 rules, I think they, along with monks, were among the worst classes in the game for scaling. It was often really hard, mechanically speaking, I think, to justify taking more than like 5 levels in Barbarian, right? That is definitely not the case with 2024, and so I'm really excited to explore a lot of those mid and even high level abilities with this build today. As for our species, I think for the first time yet for 2024 builds, I'm gonna wanna go Dwarf. There are plenty of great options, but if we're building for survivability above all, it's hard to ignore the Dwarf, since not only do they get cool features like 120 range dark vision, resistance to and advantage against poison and stone cutting, instead of giving dwarves like subspecies, right? In 2024, they've kind of just given all dwarves the Hill Dwarf feature from 2014 of an extra hit point per level. It's not amazing, but coupled with the best hit die in game with barbarians, the high constitution we're going to have, resistance to probably most of the damage that you're going to be taking, and even a feat to add to our hit point pool, we are going to have a boatload of hit points. As for our background, I always say go with an old or custom background if you can, but if you can't, I'm pretty happy with the farmer background here mechanically, as it'll give us both the ability score increases we want and the origin feat we want. I just hope you're happy writing farming into your backstory. As for that origin feat, yes, we're going to take tough. I might not necessarily want to go this route if I were playing this character in game. That's something you're going to hear a lot from me today, probably. But yes, if we're prioritizing survivability, it's definitely the way to go, as it gives us an extra 2 hit points per character level, and especially as a barbarian, we're going to be stretching those hit points out a lot. For our starting ability scores, I assume we're going the point buy method as always and say let's take a 15 constitution and a +2 there, a 15 strength and a +1 there, and then a 14 dexterity. And yes, again, if I were really playing this character in game, I'd probably prioritize strength over constitution personally. Sometimes one of the best ways to ensure that an enemy attacks you instead of your allies is to be a big threat on the battlefield, right? And increasing our damage might ultimately make us better at our job than prioritizing survivability. But since I love to put things in a spreadsheet and compare them to one another, and since I love to always explore the extent of what is possible in a build, for tank builds, I always go for the durability option over the damage one, and then say a lot of times you might want to do this differently in game, right? So sure, emphasize strength over constitution if you want, but we'll prioritize constitution and survivability. And in that vein, for our starting equipment, I'm going to say let's grab some scale mail armor, a shield, and then a few weapons that you love. Shield is going to prioritize our survivability with that +2 to armor class, right? As an aside, my friend Jeremy over at Insight Check did a World Tree tank build recently that did prioritize damage over survivability a bit more than we're going to be doing today. I think his build was great. Go check it out if you want to see a different take on this subclass. As for what weapons we should use though, we have a ton of great options. I'm mostly going to be choosing them based on their weapon mastery properties, so let's talk about that now. Right, barbarians get to choose 2 weapons to have mastery in, and then, we get to do cool special things with those weapons specifically when we hit with them, right? As a tank, I think the 2 most important for us, at least in the early game, are going to be Sap and Topple. Topple is just so good. It forces an enemy to make a constitution saving throw when you hit them or they are knocked prone. No size restriction here, which is pretty awesome, but that constitution save might make a lot of enemies hard to knock down. The weapons to consider for Topple here I think would be Battle Axe, pretty quintessential barbarian weapon, though I think I'd probably take the Trident instead, not only because it's freaking awesome and unique. Come on, a Trident? I don't think I've ever built around the Trident before, have I? But also because it does the same damage as the Battle Axe, but also has the thrown property, unlike the Battle Axe, meaning that in a pinch you could toss it at your target if need be. Knocking enemies prone is great, not only because it'll give attacks made against them within 5 feet advantage, but also because it's going to take half of their move speed to stand up, making it much harder for them to get to your allies and attack them on the enemy's turn, right? This is going to be a theme for this build, no question. As for Sap, I really love this mastery for a tank, especially in the early game, as it greatly reduces the need for any kind of soft taunt feature. If you hit them with Sap, the creature has disadvantage on their next attack before the start of our next turn. And while sure, it doesn't impose disadvantage on all of their attacks, early on especially, it's pretty rare for enemies to get more than one attack on their turn, right? So it's a pretty effective debuff to help keep your friends safe. And yourself too, I suppose, if they've got no better target than you. At Barbarian 1, we still get Rage, right? It's still awesome, better than ever even. It's a bonus action to activate. We can't be wearing heavy armor, but we now have 2 uses per day and then get 1 back on a short rest. Thank you. That's honestly huge for those playing at tables that tend to have a lot of combats per day but still might get a short rest or 2, right? We still get resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage while raging, and do an extra 2 damage for now to our target when we hit them with a strength-based attack, but it doesn't have to be just melee anymore, right? Thrown weapons count now. Nice. We still have advantage on strength saves and checks, though note that grappling is no longer like an athletics check on our end, right? It's giving a saving throw to our enemy. They make it against our strength-based DC when we hit them with an unarmed strike, and in that case, the unarmed strike doesn't do damage since we're not a monk. So anyways, it's still nice, but rage isn't necessarily going to improve our grappling effectiveness. Now, rage lasts for 10 minutes so long as we continue to make an attack against an enemy, or in this new book, force them to make a save, or also new, simply use our bonus action to keep it going. That's pretty great. And then finally, yes, we do still have the drawback that rage prohibits us from casting or concentrating on spells. Rip Barbarian Pallies who smite. Oh well, I still love rage. We also get unarmored defense still here at Barbarian 1, but as usual for me, I'm not planning on using it. It lets our armor class be equal to 10 plus our constitution modifier plus our dexterity modifier when we're unarmored, right? Though we can still use a shield, but we will be better off with medium armor since we only have a 14 dexterity. At level 2, I give a shout out to my channel members. You guys, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. It truly does. And if you are not a member of the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining. There's a button down there. You click on it. It says join. It will tell you all of the benefits that you can get by becoming a member, including access to the library of write-ups that I do for each of these builds to help you recreate them a little more easily yourself, access to the community Discord server, even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do, which I'm going to be recording tomorrow, and that excites me because it's like my favorite day of the month. If you can and are interested in supporting the channel that way, I would be super grateful. But if you can't or don't want to, that's okay. Being here, watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, clicking on the notifications bell, these are all also great ways to support the channel. So thanks for just doing any and or all of those things. Okay, no, at level 2, barbarians get danger sense, which gives us advantage on saving throws, dexterity saving throws, that is, always appreciated. And then, yes, my favorite barbarian ability, reckless attack, which lets us just have advantage on all strength-based attacks when we want. Now, even on reaction attacks too, hooray. But then it comes with the cost, which is actually a benefit for us, of giving enemies advantage on their attacks against us, right? And yes, I would always plan on using reckless attack, especially as a tank, because remember, we want our enemies to attack us so they're not attacking our friends, right? That's our job. And while sure, the spreadsheet numbers would look a lot better if I didn't assume that we were using this all of the time, I just don't think I could sleep at night if I tried to pretend that we were a barbarian hoping to draw enemy fire but not using reckless attack. So we've got it turned on. At level 3, first up, we get a new kind of feature, Primal Knowledge. This was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but they buffed it for 2024. It now gives us another skill proficiency from the Barbarian skill list, yes, but better yet, says that when we're raging, we can use our strength in lieu of the normal ability score for acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. That's pretty incredible, really. Barbarians are half-decent skill monkeys now, potentially. Who'd have thunk? But then, yes, we get our subclass here at level 3, and we are, as I've said, going with the Path of the World Tree. So let's read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about the World Tree Barbarian. Trace the roots and branches of the multiverse. Barbarians who follow the path of the World Tree connect with the cosmic tree Yggdrasil, I think I'm saying that right, through their rage. This tree grows among the outer planes, connecting them to each other and the material plane. These barbarians draw on the tree's magic for vitality and as a means of dimensional travel. Okay, sounds super cool. A little Norse mythology worked in there. Sounds kind of druidic or shamanistic even, which I really like. So, as a World Tree Barbarian, we get the Vitality of the Tree feature, which is really kind of 2 features in one. First of all, it says that when we rage, we get a number of temporary hit points equal to our Barbarian level. Fantastic. And no limit to how often we can do this, other than how often we can rage, of course. So it'll make us just that much tankier, which is awesome. But then also, and arguably better even, at the beginning of each of our turns, while our rage is active, we can choose another creature within 10 feet of ourselves to gain temporary hit points as well. In that case, we simply roll a number of d6s equal to our rage damage bonus, so 2d6 for now, right? And that's how many temporary hit points our ally gets. There's no limit to how often we can do this, and it doesn't even take a bonus action action or a reaction or anything to do. They just have to be within 10 feet of us, which admittedly might be a little tricky. It's still an awesome ability, and now we're hopefully going to be keeping allies from being attacked as much as possible and giving at least one of them temporary hit points each turn to help them survive better if and when they do get attacked. That is a grade A protection feature right there. I love it. Don't forget, we also get our third rage here at this level per day, right? Though much less important than it used to be now that we get one of them back on a short rest. It's still nice to have. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and again, if we were truly prioritizing survivability over everything else, then I think I'd probably take the durable feat here. I have never used this feat in a build before, ever, but that's because the 2014 version of it was pretty lousy, I think. In 2024, it got greatly improved. It still bumps our constitution by 1, putting it at a nice even 18 now, but then says that we have advantage on death saves, nice, just in case, and then lets us spend a bonus action to use a hit die, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. Now, okay, I'm not saying that this is something I would do all of the time. In fact, I do it almost never, I think, in combat, unless it looked like I was really close to going down. I mean, we don't get to add our constitution modifier to the healing here, which we normally would get to do if we were just using those hit dice during a short rest, right? And it takes up our bonus action. But especially as a raging barbarian who tends to get a lot more mileage out of our hit points thanks to damage resistance than most characters, and with our best in-game D12 hit die, sure. Let's take the feat just to see what it might do for our survivability numbers if we were to use all of these hit dice up in combat when we crunch the numbers. We get our third weapon mastery at this level too, and I'm gonna say let's just grab slow. We'd need a javelin or a whip to use the mastery in melee, either of which are cool, especially the whip since it has reach, right? A shield and a whip? Come on, that's awesome. Despite the D4 damage die. Anyways, slow is just a nice tool to add to our weapon tool belt here. We might not want to be sapping as much these days as enemies start to get multi-attack more regularly, meaning we'd only be giving disadvantage on one of potentially multiple attacks, right? And if we could, say, topple an enemy with one attack, then slow them with a second once we get extra attack next level, they'd probably stand on their turn and only have 5 or 10 feet of move speed left, meaning they're either wasting their turn dashing to get to someone else, or probably more likely, shrugging their shoulders and attacking us. And that is exactly what we want. Now, remember, thanks to the way that you can draw or stow a weapon as part of each attack you make with it, now, in 2024, this can work just fine swapping weapons once we've got extra attack. On our turn, let's say we've got our trident out and we topple the enemy with it. Then, if they fail their save, we stow that trident as part of the attack we just made, and then draw our javelin as part of our next attack, right? Again, once we've got extra attack, and then we hit with that. Now they're prone and slowed, and we are laughing. That said, with extra attack, it also wouldn't be a terrible idea to just make 2 sap attacks against 2 different enemies instead, right? Giving disadvantage to both of them, or maybe toppling 2 different enemies. It'll depend on the situation and the battlefield, but I love having options. At level 5, barbarians get fast movement, which just straight up gives an extra 10 feet of movement when we're not wearing heavy armor, and keep in mind that dwarves have like a 30-foot speed in 2024, unlike the 25 that they used to have. So now 40 feet of move speed, that's great to help us get to our enemies much more effectively. And then of course, yes, we get extra attack here so that we can do all of our awesome maneuvers with our weapon masteries like I've been talking about. At level 6, as a World Tree Barbarian, we get branches of the tree, my very favorite World Tree subclass feature. This is so freaking good. It says that whenever a creature starts their turn within 30 feet of us, we can use our reaction to grab them with spectral branches from the World Tree, and if they fail their strength save against it, pull or teleport them to within 5 feet of ourselves. Best of all, after they teleport, we can reduce their speed to 0 until the end of their turn, meaning they're probably not going to be attacking the ally they were originally planning on attacking, and that is exactly what we want. You can use this against allies too if you need to kind of get them out of harm's way, right? But so now we are rooting, pun intended, or snaring or slowing 1 or 2 enemies via our weapon mastery attacks, and then rooting potentially a third on their turn via our branches of the tree feature, and we are doing work to really encourage our enemies to attack us instead of our allies, without even using any kind of taunt. It's so awesome. Don't forget, we also get our 4th rage use per long rest at this level too. Okay, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. and I have some things to say. So first of all, for those who don't know, yes, for tank builds, I like to pit the characters against 3 hypothetical combat situations and calculate how much damage they would take if A, the enemy just focused all of their attacks on our character, and B, if our character had access to all of their resources. It's not incredibly realistic, both because it's unlikely that all enemies would just focus fire us and only us on their turns, but also because we're unlikely to have all of our resources every fight. Regardless, it's a decent model for calculating survivability, maybe especially if we use the same hypothetical encounters for every single build, right? But should I continue to do that with 2024 builds? Part of me wants to update the encounters, mostly because when I first came up with this model years ago, the encounters I designed, there's like one boss fight, one kind of more typical average fight, and then a level appropriate fireball. They were of medium difficulty as per the encounter builder in the old Dungeon Master's Guide. I was so naive. I learned fairly quickly that a medium difficulty encounter is not all that difficult for most D&D parties, especially if there's any character optimization going on. But the problem is, I really like to compare these builds to one another, and so to change it up now, well, it wouldn't really let me see how this build compares survivability-wise to those old 2014 builds, right? For that reason, I'll probably keep the encounters the same, at least until we get the new monster manual next year, at which point I'll probably adjust, since then we'll hopefully have a little handful of tank builds that we can compare to one another, yeah? Right, so I calculate 2 numbers. First is damage taken per round, or DTPR, which is just the amount of damage this character would take in a single round if the enemy or enemies just focused them, and then rounds to die, or RTD, which simply indicates how long this character would survive if they took that exact amount of damage every single round, right? Again, we're assuming we've got access to all of our resources. I'm assuming for this build we've got half plate armor and a shield. Our armor class is going to be a 19 in that case. Not bad, though our enemies will have advantage on attacks against us, so not great. But our hit points will be amazing, including tough, dwarven toughness, an 18 constitution, 6 levels of barbarian, temporary hit points from vitality surge once per combat, and then sure, 6 hit dice we could use, using a bonus action for each, right, to heal ourselves if need be, thanks to the durable feat. We would have a potential total, on average, of 110 hit points at level 6. And we're taking half damage most of the time thanks to rage. That is nice. And so, against our boss fight, which at this level was a young white dragon, right, we would take 16 damage per round, and at that rate we would survive for 7 rounds before we were knocked unconscious. The typical fight here was 4 berserkers, and our DTPR there is 12, and our RTD is 9. And then against a level 3 DC 14 fireball, we'd take 18 damage per round and would survive for 7 rounds. And compared to other tank builds that I've done in the past, this is kind of middle of tier 2 by comparison. But let me say this here, and I'm probably going to repeat this a few times before we're done. Yes, as with all barbarian tank builds that I've ever done, actually, the pure survivability numbers when compared to other tank builds done in a vacuum are just never going to be great by comparison. There are 2 main reasons for this. One, most of those other builds are using spells. Surprise, spells are good in D&D for more than just dealing damage, right? So yeah, the shield spell maybe especially, but other things as well, like Shield of Faith, etc. As a result, our armor class is just never going to be as high as a lot of those builds can get up to. And when you couple that with reason number 2, that we're giving our enemies advantage on attacks against us thanks to Reckless Attack, yeah, we're just going to be getting hit a lot. And even though we have resistance to most of that damage, taking half damage will never be as good as taking no damage as a result of a really high AC and not giving advantage to enemies for hitting when they try to hit us, right? All of that said, I still feel like this build is going to be as good a tank as any I've built, and probably better than most, maybe better than all. With all of the control and buffing that we're going to have going on, combined with the incentive that we're giving enemies to attack us, thanks to Reckless Attack, we're going to do an incredible job of actually fulfilling our designated role, protecting our allies from harm by primarily getting enemies to attack us instead of them. And our survivability will still be incredible, sufficient really for any fight that you might find yourself in. So don't get too hung up on these comparison numbers and focus instead on what this build would actually be doing in game, okay? For what it's worth, we are outperforming durability-wise any other barbarian tank I've ever built at this level, and that will continue to be the case throughout the life of the character. So chin up. All right. At level 7, we get Feral Instinct as a Barbarian, and this has been changed because surprise is different now. That is, we can always act normally on our turn, even if we're surprised. We just have disadvantage on initiative rolls now when we're surprised, right? Feral Instinct still gives us advantage on all initiative rolls now, so even if we're surprised, we would just make an initiative roll as normal instead of at disadvantage, right? But also, we get a new feature at Barbarian 7, Instinctive Pounce, which lets us move up to half our move speed as part of the bonus action we use to activate our rage. That would give us a whopping 60 feet of movement on round 1. Super nice to get into melee. At level 8, we get another feat, and again, in the interest of survivability overall, I think I just increased my constitution here. As a reckless barbarian, we're just going to get more out of hit points than we would out of a higher armor class. So I'm not as interested in like trying to bolster my AC via medium armor master or a better dexterity score or anything. Speaking of AC though, note that with a 20 constitution and a 14 dex, our unarmored defense would be just as good as like mundane half plate now, which is cool. Of course, you might have magical armor by now, in which case you probably want to stay with the armor, but just something to keep in mind. I mean, I always say if it's mechanically the same, might as well go naked. At level 9, we get Brutal Strike. This got a massive rework over the old Brutal Critical ability. So much better. And similar to what we're seeing with so many martials in 2024, Brutal Strike sort of just says, hey, you can give up something here if you want to gain something else instead. In our case, we'd be giving up advantage on one of our attacks when we're attacking recklessly to, instead of get advantage, do an extra d10 of damage if we hit, and choose to either push an enemy 15 feet away from us and then move up to half our speed towards them without provoking an opportunity attack even, that's nice, or reduce their move speed by 15 feet until our next turn with the hamstring ability. They get no saving throw against this, and oh, this is so dang good for us. We just have so many options for rooting and snaring our enemies now. I think my go-to move here personally from this point on would be to recklessly attack one enemy with a topple weapon, and then once they're prone, well, now I don't need reckless attack anymore to get advantage, right? So I would swap out to a slow weapon, hit them with it with advantage, because even though I'm giving up my reckless attack advantage to, well, I'd hamstring them here, I still have advantage because they're prone. And this combo would take most enemies from 30 feet of move speed to 5 between slow and hamstring. Then on their turn, if they stood up, it would take half their move speed, so now they're at 2.5 feet of move speed, meaning they couldn't go anywhere without dashing. And even then, they'd only be able to move 5 feet. So yeah, as long as your allies are 10 plus feet away from you, ain't none of them getting attacked by that enemy, at least. Or, I mean, alternatively, sure, prone an enemy and then push them 15 feet away from you. As long as your allies are behind you, that's potentially even better. Coupled with your branches of the tree, you're going to be consistently knocking down at least 2 enemies on the battlefield every single round. I love it. Our rage damage goes up to 3 here, which is not only a little damage increase, it's also for us a little protection increase, since remember, the temporary hit points that we dole out to an ally via our Vitality of the Tree feature is based on our rage damage, right? Now we're giving out potentially 3d6 in temporary hit points every round. Okay, at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, the only thing we've really done for our survivability is to increase our constitution to 20, bringing our total potential hit points to 208 if we had all of our hit dice available to heal with. And I mean, in case you were wondering, that is so many more hit points than any other tank build I've ever done at this level, right? And throughout the build, really. But yeah, we've also picked up some really nice additional ways to lock down our enemies, as well as picked up some great utility and additional protection power too, and even a little more damage. We are in a fantastic place at the moment, truly. But if we were fighting a young blue dragon here, that's the boss fight, and they were just focused on attacking us and only us on their turn, we would take 20 damage per round on average, and at that rate we'd survive for 11 rounds before we keeled over. The typical fight here was 4 hobgoblin captains, and the DTPR there was 21, and the RTD rounds to die was 10, and then versus a DC 15 level 5 fireball, we would take 24 damage on average, and at that rate we'd survive for 9 rounds. And compared to other tank builds, yeah, we're basically in the same place as before, kind of mid tier 2, but I'm telling you, we're doing a way better job of keeping our allies protected than most of those builds are. And we're probably doing more damage too. And yeah, I mean, if you can just take all of the attacks from all of the enemies for 10 rounds and your allies still haven't taken out the enemies, you need to get yourself some new strikers. That's all I'm saying is all. Okay, at level 10, World Tree Barbarians get Battering Roots, and this is where things really start to get fun, because this ability says that when we're using a weapon with the heavy or versatile property, our reach with them is 10 feet greater as tendrils of the World Tree extend from us when we attack. So we've got a 15-foot reach now. It would be 20 if we were using a reach weapon, right? Of course, you could drop your shield and grab a glaive or a halberd if you wanted, but I think I'm pretty content with 15 feet. Anyways, best of all, when we hit with one of these weapons on our turn, so no opportunity attacks or anything, of course, we're always using our reaction to root enemies, right? So not a huge deal there. But when we hit on our turn, then we can activate the push or topple mastery in addition to a different mastery property we're using with that weapon. Okay, this is awesome. So now we could be using, say, a longsword to sap an enemy and still topple them, or a battle axe to topple them and then push them on the same hit. It's really too bad that there aren't any melee weapons that are heavy or versatile and have the slow property, as that's what I'd most want here, I think. You could topple and push one enemy, swap weapons to slow and hamstring a second, and then root a third with your reaction. Your potential for control is astounding here. It's so good. We also get a 4th weapon mastery here, and I'm just gonna say, pick your favorite, have fun with it. At level 11, we get Relentless Rage, which says that if you drop to 0 hit points while raging and don't die outright, in other words, you didn't take so much damage that it put you in the negative equal to your hit point maximum, which is something I have a hard time believing could ever happen to us, then you can make a DC 10 Constitution save, and if you succeed, your hit points, instead of dropping to 0, change to a number equal to twice your Barbarian level. So 22 for now, and that is a nice improvement over the old version, which just gave you 1 hit point, right? Every time this happens and you successfully make this save, the DC increases by 5 until you take a short or long rest, at which point it resets to 10. All right, what's this gonna do for our survivability? Our Constitution saving throw right now is a +9, which means we can't fail that first attempt, unless there was some sort of negative modifier, right? We'd likely succeed on the second and even have like about a 50% chance of making the third. For ease of number crunching, I'm just gonna say that this feature is gonna add 2 to our rounds to die for every encounter. There's a decent chance it could add more, but it also only might add 1 if you get unlucky, so 2 feels safe to me. At level 12, we get another feat, and I'm gonna take the thing that I think I probably would have taken clear back at level 4, maybe level 8, if I were actually playing this character in game, and that is Polearm Master. This might come as a surprise to some of you, but Polearm Master is still a pretty good feat, a really good one, depending on the build, I think. So it hasn't changed a ton since 2014, though it's now a half feat, which is awesome, bumping our strength to 17. Other than that, it still lets us make a reaction attack when someone enters our reach, though it's no longer called an opportunity attack, which makes it a little screwy with the interaction with things like the Sentinel feat, right, which requires an actual opportunity attack. Again, our reaction is almost always taken, so I don't care that much about this. What we do really love about the feat, though, is the bonus action attack it lets us make with the butt of our weapon if we're wielding a heavy and reach weapon, or a quarterstaff, or a spear. Interesting. So both quarterstaffs and spears have the versatile property. This is fantastic. So now we could wield one, enjoy a reach of 15 feet with it, make 3 attacks per turn with it, right? 2 with one end and then 1 with the bonus action and the butt, and topple or push them thanks to battering roots, in addition to the mastery of the weapon itself. Now, the damage die for spears and quarterstaves is a d6 instead of a d8 if we were using a longsword or a battle axe or a trident, but who cares? A third attack every turn. That can totally mess with our opponents. I love it. Spears can sap, quarterstaves can topple. I'm probably focusing on the quarterstaff myself, so I can topple and push. Besides, this druidic tree-focused barbarian just feels right with a quarterstaff, don't they? But, I mean, sap and topple with a spear wouldn't be bad either. And again, we could always swap weapons out. So Maybe now you're going to topple and push one enemy with your quarterstaff, topple and push a second with your bonus action using the butt, right? And then swap weapons if you want to slow and hamstring a third. Or, I mean, sure, keep toppling and pushing different targets. Or maybe sapping and toppling, whatever you need. And then root a fourth with your reaction. Yeah, this is amazing, and definitely something that I would do on this character over bolster my survivability a lot earlier, I think. Though it is made a lot better with our level 10 battering roots feature, so maybe waiting until now wasn't the worst idea in the world. We also get a 5th rage now at this level on the off chance that we're actually running out of rages during the day. And then at level 13, okay, now that we've got that feat, I think I might just maybe take a very quick detour into fighter. It's by no means necessary. It's a questionable decision at best. I wouldn't do this if the campaign were going to level 20, because the Barbarian capstone is incredible. I might not even do this anyways, but for the sake of the spreadsheet, I like the fighter dip. For the fighting style, it would let us pick up, and even the little self-heal we could get. And yeah, other than just gain more Barbarian levels, we really haven't been doing a ton to increase our survivability, right? This will at least give us a little bump in that department. Feel free to ignore and just stay the course with Barbarian. But if we did go fighter 1, we'd actually get 3 more weapon masteries now for a total of 7, which is kind of cool and crazy, truly letting us pick the best tool for any and all situations. And then we'd get a fighting style, right? And while, again, if I were making this choice in game, I'd at least consider going protection since it's so strong now. It lets us use our reaction to interpose our shield between an attack made against our ally who's within 5 feet of us, and when we do so, it causes both the triggering attack and every single attack roll against our ally until our next turn to have disadvantage, so long as we stay within 5 feet of that ally. That's honestly incredible. It's such a great protection-y, tanky feature. The problem, of course, is that our reaction will often be spoken for as we're pulling and snaring with the world tree roots, right? But I mean, hey, there will be times when you don't really have anyone to pull and snare, or maybe for whatever reason your ally's fighting next to you instead of staying well away. Maybe there's only one enemy left, I don't know. In that case, it would be nice to have a feature like this. I, of course, beholden to the spreadsheet, will just assume that we're taking the defense fighting style to bump our armor class by 1, but yeah, again, as a reckless barbarian especially, that's not going to do a ton for our survivability. And our survivability is probably good enough at this point anyways. Finally, at fighter 1, we get second wind, which lets us heal ourselves for a d10 plus our fighter level a couple of times per day, recovering 1 use of it with a short rest. It's not much, but we'll take every scrap of hit points we can get, so sure, I will use it when I crunch numbers, which happens right now. Since our last check, we've increased our armor class by 1, given ourselves a little heal via second wind, added a couple of levels to our rounds to die thanks to Relentless Rage, and also added a lot more control on the battlefield thanks to Battering Roots and Polearm Master. We have a 20 armor class now and a potential total of 301 hit points on average at level 13. Oh, this would be so much fun to play with on the battlefield. The boss fight here was an adult white dragon, and if they just did nothing but bite and claw at us on their turn, we would take 21 damage per round on average, and at that rate we would survive for 17 rounds. The typical fight here was against 5 helmed horrors, and the DTPR there was 30, and the rounds to die at that rate was 12. And then against a level 7 DC 16 fireball, we would take 30 damage per round on average. And yes, I am assuming that we have advantage on those saving throws. And at that rate, we'd survive for 13 rounds. And so actually, we've kind of moved up a skosh here compared to other tank builds, but it's still just kind of like upper end of tier 2 instead of middle of tier 2. Still plenty tanky and still out protecting most or all other tank builds, I think. At level 14, as much fun as it would be to get to Action Surge and a fighter subclass, I think at level 14 I'd probably just go back to Barbarian. That better hit die plus the scaling temporary hit points we get when we rage are small incentives, but incentives nonetheless. Plus, there are still some great toys in our future if we stay the course here. So at Barbarian 13, then we get improved Brutal Strike, which gives us 2 new ways to use our Brutal Strike. Staggering Blow gives an enemy disadvantage on the next save they make and prevents them from taking opportunity attacks until our next turn. This can be nice both for our friends who have a devastating like save or suck spell or ability to use, right? Maybe a stunning strike from a monk, Or we could take advantage of it ourselves, making it more likely that we knock them prone or pull them back to us if they manage to get away, etc. The other new option here, Sundering Blow, says that the next attack roll made by someone else, not us, against this target gets a +5 to hit. Could be nice for someone saving up a big whammy, right? Especially if the enemy has a really hard to hit AC. I generally prefer the first Brutal Strikes, though, if I'm being honest, especially for this build, but these will be situationally really nice to have. At level 15, we would be a Barbarian 14, and we just had to get to at least Barbarian 14 on this build because it gets us the World Tree Barbarian Capstone, Travel Along the Tree, and this says that when we activate our Rage and as a bonus action while Rage is active thereafter, we can teleport up to 60 feet to a space we can see. What's more, once per Rage, we can increase that range to 150 feet. And when we do this, bring up to 6 willing creatures who are within 10 feet of us along for the ride. That is just fantastic. Such great utility and super useful in combat too. Once per turn. I mean, imagine teleporting 60 feet, maybe to the far side of an enemy who's 30 feet away from us, right? To pull that enemy towards us then as a reaction, leaving them just a million miles away from anyone they might want to attack who's not you. This is just so awesome and so fun. Bridges down? No problem. Whole party jumps to the other side. Dragon raining death down from 150 feet in the air. Bamf. Now I'm riding on its back. I love it. At level 16, we would be a Barbarian 15, and that means we get Persistent Rage. This says that once per day, when you roll initiative, you can regain all expended uses of your Rage, up to 5 for us now, right? Yeah, I mean, you're never running out of Rage at this point. What's more, that Rage now lasts 10 minutes without you needing to do anything to keep it going, and it only ends if you don heavy armor or go unconscious. In other words, being incapacitated no longer kills it like it usually does. It's a nice utility. I don't know that we're going to get a ton of use out of it. I mean, keeping it going more easily is great. Regaining spent uses of it, I have a hard time imagining that you're actually going to use that very often, but hey, when you do need it, you'll be glad it's there. But then finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Barbarian 16, and that means we get another feat. And again, this is probably something that I do much earlier in this build, and that's take the Shieldmaster feat. This feat is also so much better in 2024. I love it to death. So it bumps our strength to 18, which will improve our hit chance, our damage, among other things, but then tells us that once per turn, if we hit a creature with a melee weapon within 5 feet of us, so we can't take advantage of that great reach we have in this scenario. But if we hit them with an attack action, we can immediately, no bonus action or reaction required, bash them with our shield. If they then fail a strength save against that bash, we can push them 5 feet back or knock them prone. What's more, if we have to make a dex save to take half damage against something, like a fireball, hooray, damage report, we can use our reaction to take 0 damage if we succeed on the save, putting ourselves like behind our shield, right? It's kind of too bad that we lost you can add your shield's AC to your dex save that this feat used to give, but that only worked if the thing we were saving against targeted us specifically and wasn't like an area of effect, right? And that came up very rarely outside of like Disintegrate. So not a huge loss. The buff we got by being able to shove or knock prone without having to use our bonus action is huge. Oh, plus the fact that it's a half feat, right? Really, really awesome. We just have so many ways to knock enemies prone now. I can't imagine using a topple weapon anymore. Probably switching to a spear, since now we can topple with Shieldmaster and with Battering Roots. So sure, throw a sap on our attack now too, giving them disadvantage on their next attack, right? We are doing so much work to make life miserable for our enemies, and we're doing it all without casting a single spell. So it's time for our final damage report. Since last check, we haven't done a ton to increase our survivability. There wasn't a ton left to do. Our dex saves will be a little better now, thank goodness, since we're going to be going up against a meteor swarm now instead of a fireball, but we've picked up some really nice utility, debuff options, and even increased our damage and hit chance while adding one more knock 'em prone tool to our very impressive tool belt. Our AC is still at 20, but our total potential hit points, including our hit dice and second wind for self-healing, plus our temporary hit points bump when we rage, is an incredible 391. Holy cow, we almost hit 400. But the boss fight here at this level was an adult red dragon, and if they just spent their their turn attacking us and only us, we would take 28 damage per round on average, and at that rate we'd survive for 17 rounds. The typical fight was 5 Earth Elementals, and the DTPR there was an impressive 53. We'd survive for 10 rounds at that rate. And Meteor Swarm was very painful, 69. Nice. Not nice. Thank goodness for Shieldmaster. And at that rate, we'd survive for 8 rounds. Yeah, and it's a good thing that we shouldn't run into too many fights when we're getting hit with Meteor Swarm 8 rounds in a row, right? Would any party survive that? Maybe with a lot of counterspells, I suppose. Unless the enemy had a high Constitution save and or legendary resistance. Anyways, par for the course. Compared to other tank builds, we're still kind of middle of tier 2 here, and happy to be there, honestly. So, okay, let's get into some final thoughts here. The tier score for this build, if you just take the average rounds to die for every one of the fights at every single damage report and just average it all into one number, we'd end up with a 12.7, which, yeah, puts us kind of upper half of tier 2, surprising no one. But I mean, let's be real. You guys hopefully know by now that even though I love to explore what's possible numbers-wise, whether we're calculating for damage or survivability, or even in some cases healing power, there are very, very few builds that I've ever done where I just like straight up recommend that you follow what I've done with exactness at every level, right? Because as fun as stuff can be to theorycraft about in a lab, in actual gameplay, the best laid plans of mice and barbarians oft go awry. And this is perhaps nowhere more true than in my tank builds, I think. If you just went off of pure survivability numbers, you might be tempted to think that the Barbarian Angel is my best tank ever. And I mean, I'll be honest, I think that build has a ton of potential to be really good and really fun. But in what world do we need to survive against the attacks of 5-helmed horrors for, check notes, 121 rounds? I mean, yeah, if you wanted to build just for survivability, turns out making yourself nigh impossible to hit and slowing your enemies down with spells and things can help you live for basically forever. And I mean, that's awesome, but at some point, that kind of survivability is just overkill, right? And I'd say the overkill happens way before we get to round 121. As a tank, yes, you need to be able to withstand punishment, but in reality, at most tables, in most campaigns, you kinda just need to withstand enough punishment to get through one combat encounter, maybe 2, at which point you rest and you get healed, etc., right? Once you're at that level of durability, your focus really should be on doing more than just being hard to kill. That is, targeting, debuffing, and encouraging as many enemies as possible to attack you and not your friends. And I kind of think this build does that as well as or better than pretty much any tank build I've ever done, like I've been saying. And what's really amazing about that is the fact that we did it all without a single taunt-like ability. We just stick a ton of enemies in place, or nearly so, making it so that really their only good option, for melee enemies at least, which are the vast majority of enemies in D&D 5e, is to attack us. And that is so freaking awesome. So yeah, that's why I keep saying stuff like,
if it were me, I'd delay this survivability thing in favor of this other thing that will help us land our attacks and land more of them and knock more enemies prone.
Because I think our survivability is sufficient, even at early levels, to let us focus more on control and more attacks, and my goodness, would I love to play this character in a game. It's for sure at the top of my to play list now, especially since I played the Cleric of Chaos build a couple of weeks ago in a one-shot, and yes, it was awesome, by the way. It was totally just demolished hordes of enemies with help from my friend Dallin, who was pushing and pulling them into the Spirit Guardians. But yeah, with this build, you'd just be jumping all over the battlefield, pulling enemies towards you, away from your friends, sticking them in place, knocking them prone, shoving them around, slowing them down, and it would just be a whirlwind of glee. I cannot wait to try it out myself. I hope that you are as excited to give it a shot as I am, but that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know how much I love you, because I do. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for the channel. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, I hope that you will be gentle with yourself and that you find the ability to cut yourself some slack. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. You gotta cry without weeping. talk without speaking, scream without raising your voice. You know I took the poison from the poison stream, then I floated out of here singing ah la 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 day, ah la 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 day, ah la la day. Oh, that song, Running to Stand Still by U2, one of my favorites, off of my favorite of their albums, Joshua Tree. I used to think, like, when I was in high school, the night that I had my first kiss with Becca Covey, we were at a dance together, and the last song that we slow danced to was that song, Running to Stand Still. And for the longest time, I was just like, oh, this song is just so beautiful and romantic. It was a few years before I realized, oh, this is like about a heroin addict. Oh, not as romantic as I thought, but still beautiful. Just sad beautiful. Come on, Balrog. Oh, Balrog. It's so hard to make the pictures look good when you've got a camera that does like fisheye effect, because everything at the edges looks crooked. Yeah, whatever. Okay.